Today we're going to be solving inequalities that use multiplying and dividing. Just a reminder that this is positive x, this is negative x, positive 1, and a negative 1. Let's get started. In our first problem, we have x divided by 4 is greater than or equal to negative 1. So I've taken our algebra tile and I've divided it into 4 pieces. And that's going to be equal to negative 1. That means that negative 1 is equal to one piece of this whole x. So in order to find how much one whole x is, I need to do 4 sets of negative 1. There's 1 set, 2 sets, 3 sets, and 4 sets. So one whole x is equal to negative 4, or 4 reds, which is negative 4. Let's look and see how that works with our math. So I have x over 4. To solve this, we needed 4 parts of x to equal one whole x. And we knew that was going to be greater than or equal to negative 1, and we needed 4 groups of negative 1, and that gives me negative 4. So x is greater than or equal to negative 4. Let's look at a harder problem. Let's look at our next problem. We have the opposite of x divided by 4 is less than or equal to 3. When we talked about integers, we said we couldn't have negative groups. So that means that our x has to be negative. So this can be written as negative x divided by 4 is less than or equal to positive 3. So here we have our negative x, and we've divided it into 4 pieces because it says there are 4 pieces of that. And each piece is going to be equal to positive 3. So I have positive 3. I need 4 sets of positive 3 since there are 4 pieces of my negative x. So I have a second set of positive 3, a third set of positive 3, and a fourth set of positive 3. So now we have negative x is equal to positive 12. So let's write that. I have negative x is less than or equal to positive 12. I can't have negative x. So in order to get the opposite of negative x, which is positive x, I need to take the opposite of every piece of my inequality. So just like with integers, when we did the opposite of something, we flipped everything over. So the opposite of negative x is positive x. So we have positive x, and the opposite of less than or equal to is greater than or equal to. And the opposite of positive 12, we flip it all over and we get negative 12. Negative 12. So x is greater than or equal to negative 12. Let's do another one like that. So here I have the opposite of x divided by 3 is less than or equal to negative 2. So we have x divided by 3, let's put it into 3 parts, is less than or equal to negative 2. Well, we know, we talked about how we can't have the negative 3 groups of x, or negative 1/3 of x, so we have to have a negative x. So this is really the opposite of x divided by 3 is less than or equal to negative 2. So that means for every piece of negative x, there are 2 negative counters. There's 3 pieces of x, so I have 1 group of negative 2, 2 groups of negative 2, and 3 groups of negative 2. So I took x and I multiplied it by positive 3, and I took negative 2 and multiplied it by positive 3, and I get the opposite of x, or 1 whole negative x, is less than or equal to negative 6, because we have 6 red counters. I can't have a negative x, so I need to do the opposite of every piece of this inequality. Technically what I'm doing is multiplying the entire inequality by negative 1. That just means I take the opposite of everything. So the opposite of negative x is positive x. Flip it over. The opposite of less than or equal to is greater than or equal to. And the opposite of negative 6 is positive 6. So I started with x. The opposite of x divided by 3 is less than or equal to negative 2. And we did our work and modeled it. And we found out that x is greater than or equal to positive 6. Let's look at the last problem. So I have 4 is less than or equal to the opposite of x divided by 2. So we can't have negative 2 groups, so we have to do the opposite of x divided by 2. So let's rewrite that. 4 is less than the opposite of x divided by 2. So I have x, I'm going to split it into 2 pieces. So now for every piece I have 4 positive counters. There's one group of 4, and here is a second group of 4. So 1 whole negative x equals 8 yellow counters, or 8 positive. So I took both sides and I multiplied it by 2, since there were 2 groups. So I have 8 positive is less than negative x. We can't have negative x, so we need to multiply the entire inequality by negative 1, which means I'm going to flip everything in that inequality over, because what I do to one side I have to do to the other. So I take 8 and I flip it over and I get the opposite of 8. So I have negative 8. I'm going to flip my inequality sign and take the opposite of less than. The opposite of less than is greater than. And the opposite of negative x is positive x. So our solution to this inequality is negative 8 is greater than or equal to positive x.